Hey everyone, most of you watching aren't subscribed. If you haven't yet, please smash that subscribe button so that we can hit 1,000 subs together. Let's do this. I showed up at his apartment feeling good about the night way better than most first dates. We'd met over coffee earlier that week, and he'd seemed chill, funny without trying too hard, charming without being pushy. He listened more. Then he talked, which is rare. So when he invited me over for a nightcap, I didn't overthink it. His building was one of those old mid-century places. The hallway smelled faintly of mothballs and wet carpet, and the lights flickered in that haunted house kind of way. But his apartment, it surprised me. Retro, but not fake. A lava lamp glowed lazily in one corner, casting slow-moving shadows. Across the walls, weird art prints framed in gold. A record player hummed in the background. Everything felt curated in this soft, moody kind of way. Comfortable, but not cozy. Like a hotel room someone had been living in for a little too long. He handed me a whiskey sour in a mismatched glass and gestured to the couch. I sat down, sinking slightly into the cushion. We started talking movies, music, embarrassing stories about our teenage selves. It felt normal, almost romantic. Then I noticed the shelves behind him dotted first. I thought they were just knickknacks, little jars, trinket boxes, framed ticket stubs. A few Polaroids stuck to a corkboard. I even smiled, thinking maybe he was the sentimental type, someone who liked remembering good moments. But the longer I looked, the more it started to feel off. One jar had a label, handwritten in Nessie marker, Emma clip. Inside were a few sparkly hair clips. Another said, Katie earrings, with a pair of dangly rhinestone earrings inside. There was one marked Sarah movie, filled with faded ticket stubs from some indie theater. Then Jen ticket stub, with 2 Polaroids taped to the glass. All labeled, all neatly arranged. Like trophies, I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. I tried to keep my expression neutral, to not let him see the slow creep of panic crawling up my spine. I took a sip, smiled, shifted a little, angling myself to see the rest of the shelves. More jars, dozens of them, all with names I didn't recognize, all filled with small, intimate objects. Lip gloss, a necklace, a movie stub, a keychain. Mementos carefully stolen. I told myself it had to be an art project. A weird one, sure, but not sinister. Maybe he was a writer. Or a visual artist with a theme about past relationships. Maybe. But then I saw it. A small glass jar, tucked near the edge of the shelf, newer looking than the rest. A fresh label. My name, followed by one word, clipping. I blinked. My scalp tingled like it suddenly remembered being touched. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at that jar. My stomach was a stone. I turned back to him and asked casually, Hey, what's with the jars? He smiled, that smile made my skin crawl. It wasn't the smile he'd worn earlier. It was proud, possessive. He leaned back a little and looked over at the shelf. Oh, those. Just something I do. I like remembering people. Keeping a little something, it's kind of my way of archiving things. Archiving, I echoed. Yeah, he said. Like closure. A personal museum of everyone I've ever dated. Something they left behind. Something I took. He chuckled at his own joke. I didn't. I laughed weakly, asked how long he'd been doing it. He gestured broadly to the whole wall like it was some kind of achievement. Years, he said. I don't date that often, but when I do, I make sure it counts. I remembered the necklace I'd taken off earlier and set on the coffee table, absent-mindedly, automatically. I glanced over, it was gone. I felt my breath catch. I told him I was thirsty, asked for a glass of water. He nodded and walked toward the kitchen. I stood up quietly and peeked over at the shelf again. My jar hadn't been there when we started talking. He must have labeled it while I was in the bathroom or while I wasn't looking. The realization made my chest tighten. When he returned with the glass, he caught me staring. "Oh, you saw your jar," he said, completely unbothered. "I wasn't sure if I should put it up yet, but you left your necklace." He said it like it was sweet, like it meant something. "I used it," he added, and something in the way he said that made me feel like I was going to throw up. I didn't know what to say. My skin felt too tight. My hands were shaking, but I tried not to show it. "I should go," I said, standing quickly. He nodded. "No pressure. Some people get it, some don't." I walked to the door. My back itched with the feeling of eyes on it, the jars, the Polaroids, maybe even him. I didn't look back. I walked down the hallway and out into the cold night, heart pounding, ears ringing. When I got home, I tore through my bag, counted every item in it. My earrings were still there. My keys, my wallet, lip balm, everything but the necklace. I blocked his number, deleted the app, scrubbed my browser history. And still, I didn't feel safe. For days, I couldn't shake the image of my name in his handwriting. The idea that, to him, I was already archived, stored, categorized. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that shelf, about the dozens of jars, the names, the things they left behind. I wonder how many of them even knew. How many saw their jar before they became a part of his collection? I don't tell people the full story. It's easier to say the date was weird, that he said something off and I bailed. No one wants to hear the part about the jars. They'd say I was overreacting, that it was just a creepy habit, but I know better. He didn't want connection, he wanted souvenirs. And for a moment, I was one. Most nights, I sleep with the light on, just in case someone out there still thinks I'm theirs to collect. I'm not sure this counts as a horror story in the traditional sense. There was no blood, no violence, no sudden terrifying attack. But it seriously messed with my head for days afterward. It had that same unsettling, off-kilter feeling you get when you walk into a room that wasn't meant for you, that prickling heat at the back of your neck and in your stomach, the kind of gut instinct that screams, "You've been tricked, not at all." Started like any other casual date setup. Nothing heavy, nothing serious. I met this guy on Bumble. His name was Ty. He had a sharp jawline and one of those grins that made it look like he always knew something no one else did. Not in a creepy way, at least, not at first, but in that confident, almost smug way that makes you curious. I guess now I should have read more into that. We exchanged texts for a few days. He was funny, a little odd, but in a quirky way, like the kind of guy who probably owns a cool water bottle and believes that chewing mint gum is a personality trait. I was bored and figured, why not? So I said yes to a drink. We agreed to meet at this local bar near downtown brick walls. Way too many IPAs on tap and stools that force you to sit up too straight. I arrived early, as I always do, so I could pretend to be busy on my phone while scouting out the exits. You know, just in case that Ty walked in right on time, which I weirdly respected. He came straight over, hugged me like we'd met before, and then introduced me to the two people standing just behind him. I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. Maybe they just happened to be there and he was being overly social. But no, they pulled chairs up to our table as if it was planned. I glanced around, searching for another small table to suggest we move to. But before I could say anything, one of the two men shook my hand firmly and started asking me where I was from and what I do for income. Not what I did for work, what I did for income. Weird phrasing, right? I looked at Ty, trying to figure out if this was some kind of group hang I'd missed the memo on. He just smiled and said, I figured you wouldn't mind a couple of my close friends dropping by. Then more people arrived. Not just 2 or 3 more, but 5. Then 6. Within 10 minutes, our tiny 2-person bar table was surrounded by a growing group of people. They didn't look drunk or like they were just out to have fun. They looked ... sharp, too polished. Crisp button-up shirts, spotless shoes. One guy even had a tablet. They all kept smiling. That weird kind of smile, the kind where the corners of their mouths move, but their eyes stay dead and unblinking. And then it started. The questions shifted. They began asking me if I ever thought about making money outside of my day job, if I'd ever wanted to be my own boss. I don't even remember agreeing to talk about any of this, but somehow there I was trapped in the conversation. They asked me what I'd do if I had 5 extra hours a week, if I liked traveling, if I liked helping people. It was like being hypnotized by a group of mannequins possessed all at once. One of them pulled out a brochure. Another opened an app and started showing charts. They mentioned levels and teams and financial freedom. I just sat there, nodding along like this was normal, like this was still a date. I tried joking my way out of it. Oh, so this is secretly a pyramid scheme? I said, hoping maybe they'd laugh and lighten up. Nope. They leaned in harder. They told me pyramid schemes were illegal, and this wasn't one. It was network marketing. They called me goal-oriented. They said I had a vibe. Ty looked at me like he was proud, like he'd handpicked me for this, and that's when I realized this wasn't a date. This was a recruitment. I wasn't the guest. I was the target. Somewhere in the noise, one of the women leaned across the table and said she could see me doing really well in the company. I asked what the company was called. They said I'd find out once I came to an information session. Then another guy, might have been Jared or Jordan or some other generic name, pulled out a binder and started showing earnings from other team members. The numbers didn't even make sense. Someone supposedly made $8,000. Their second month selling vitamins, skin products, meal kits. I couldn't even figure it out. It wouldn't say the name. They just kept calling it the system. I felt trapped. Not in a dramatic way, like they were going to tie me to a chair, but socially trapped. Like if I stood up, I'd look rude. Like I was failing some secret politeness test. But staying felt worse. I looked at Ty again. He just grinned like he was waiting for me to get it. Like this was supposed to blow my mind. It didn't. It made me feel sick. Not because I was afraid, but because of the sheer amount of time and effort they had clearly put into pretending this was something else. Finally, I stood up and said I had to go. They didn't stop me. They just smiled harder. Ty said we'd talk soon. I left. Fast, walked straight to my car, got in, locked the doors, and just sat there staring at my own reflection in the windshield. I deleted his number, unmatched, and blocked him on the app. I never found out what the company was called. Never got another message. But I still think about how they all sat there, waiting, how they all had that same look in their eyes, and how close I came to walking into something way deeper than just a bad date. I swear, the night was going so smoothly it almost didn't feel real. You know those dates where it's not just good, but weirdly aligned? Where every little thing clicks perfectly and your brain starts wondering if you somehow manifested? This person by accident? Yeah, it was one of those nights. I met him on Hinge. Dan, simple name. Kind of a basic profile, nothing that screamed red flags. His pictures showed him by a lake, one with a dog, and another holding a coffee cup with a smile that looked straight out of a stock photo for boyfriends. The messages were funny, but not try-hard. He spelled everything right and used full sentences, which, honestly, felt like winning the lottery these days. We agreed to meet at an outdoor patio spot by the river. It wasn't super busy, but lively enough that it didn't feel awkward or too quiet. There was good lighting, soft music playing in the background, and one of those fire pits in the middle of the space that everyone pretends doesn't smell like propane. When I arrived, Dan was already seated. He stood up as I walked over, smiling, like he was genuinely happy to see me, not that forced grin people put on when they're trying to be polite. He looked even better in person, which almost never happens. We ordered drinks. I went for a glass of wine, and he chose a fancy IPA, making a dumb joke about how all craft beers tasted like burnt leaves. It made me laugh more than it probably should have. The conversation flowed effortlessly, like we'd known each other for years. Not in a weird déjà vu way, more like we naturally knew how to listen and talk in equal parts. He asked me about my job, but didn't make it feel like a job interview. Instead, he shared details about his own work in design, talking about how he liked building things people actually used. It wasn't flashy, but it was interesting. We talked about random stuff, terrible dating stories, childhood injuries that still made us cringe, and foods we secretly hated but pretended to enjoy. We shared fries like it was no big deal, and when he brushed a little breadcrumb off my sleeve, it didn't feel creepy. It felt thoughtful. We even joked about how weirdly perfect the night was going. On paper, this was a top-tier date. No weird comments, no wandering eyes, no interruptions, and no accidental offensive remarks followed by awkward apologies. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this isn't just a fluke. Maybe this could actually go somewhere, but then, just as we were about to leave, our drinks finished, plates cleared. The waiter having already dropped off the check, a woman came walking toward us. Fast, direct, like she was on a mission. I didn't even notice her at first because I was half focused on checking if I had lipstick on my teeth. But Dan noticed. His face changed, not panic, not surprise, but like he knew this moment was coming. The woman, probably in her late 20s or early 30s, walked right up to our table and slammed her hands down. Not in a dramatic movie way, but just enough to shut everything down. Then she started yelling at him. She asked if I was the one he had been texting. She said she knew it, that she'd read the messages and called him dumb for thinking she wouldn't find out. Everyone on the patio went silent. No music, no laughter. Just that frozen awkwardness where nobody knows if they should leave or just stare. I just sat there, not scared, just completely unsure of what was happening. Dan didn't look at me. He just stared at her and she kept going. It turned out they weren't just casually seeing each other. They were living together. Full on, living together, shared bills, shared bed, shared dog, and apparently she had found the texts. All of them. Everything he'd said to me, the compliments, the plans, the flirty comments, she had screenshots of it all. The worst part? This wasn't new. She said right there, in front of me, in front of everyone, that he had done this before. That this was a pattern. She told me she'd been tracking his location because she knew he was lying about where he was going. I remember thinking, this can't be real. No way. But then she turned to me. Not angry. Just tired. She said she didn't blame me. And then she walked away. Just like that. And finally spoke. He apologized, tried to explain, but I didn't hear a word. Everything from that night, the jokes, the compliments, the details he'd shared flipped, instantly like a switch. He wasn't some amazing match. He was a guy running a double life, and I was just the latest person who hadn't figured it out yet. I left without another word. Got in my car, drove home, and blocked his number before I even pulled into my driveway. No closure. No explanation. Just one of those nights that burns itself into your brain and makes you question how good your radar actually is. No, every time. A date feels too good. I think about that patio table and wonder how many other people thought the same thing. How many other women sat there, laughing at the burnt leaf jokes, sharing fries, trusting smiles, only to find out they were part of the same story. Because the truth is, sometimes the person you think you're connecting with is just a character. They're playing. And sometimes the perfect date is just the beginning of a very messy truth. I knew the night was going to be weird the second I walked into the restaurant and saw two people already sitting at the table. The place was a chill, middle-of-the-road Italian spot, not too fancy, but not cheap takeout either. It had exposed brick walls and those little fake candles on every table that flicker just enough to feel cozy, but not so much that they're distracting. The whole vibe was very much first date safe zone. I was scanning the room, looking for a guy named Matt. We had matched on a dating app about a week earlier and exchanged just enough messages to make me think meeting up wouldn't be painful. His profile said he was into hiking, old movies, and had some kind of job in tech sales, which honestly could mean anything, but I wasn't picky. The basics checked out. Then I spotted him. He was already sitting down, looking calm and collected. I started walking toward him, but then I froze because there was a woman sitting right across from him. Not just any woman she was clearly with. Him, not a friend, not a random stranger accidentally seated nearby. They looked like a pear dot. My first dumb thought was maybe I had walked up to the wrong guy. But then Matt saw me, stood up, and smiled like this was the most normal thing in the world. And then he introduced the woman as his mother. Yes, his mother, and not in a casual, oh, she just happened to drop him off kind of way. No, she was dressed to the nines, pearls, lipstick, perfectly curled hair, sprayed stiff enough to hold through a hurricane, and shoes that definitely weren't meant for walking very far. She looked like she was ready for a fancy event, not a casual dinner. I laughed nervously, hoping it was some kind of joke or misunderstanding. Maybe she was just dropping something off and would leave soon. But no, she stayed seated, took a sip of her wine, and gestured to the chair next to her as if inviting me to join. And then she immediately launched into a barrage of questions. At first, it was small talk, almost polite. Did you have trouble parking? She asked. I was already spiraling mentally, but sat down anyway, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. Matt just sat there like this was completely normal, like this was how all dates worked. But then the questions turned invasive. She wanted to know where I was from, if my parents were still together, what religion I was raised in, how many children I wanted to have, and of all things, what my cholesterol was like. All the while, she was nodding as if she was keeping some kind of mental scorecard. I glanced at Matt for help, hoping he'd tell her to back off, or at least admit she was being ridiculous. But he didn't. He just kept buttering bread as if he was a ghost at the table, completely removed from the conversation. Then she complimented my earrings, only to follow it with a sharp jab. But I wouldn't wear that dress if I were meeting someone's mother for the first time. It was a simple black dress, nothing wild, neither too short nor tight, just a dress. But apparently it was too much for her. She said it as if it were helpful advice, then quickly pivoted to what kind of clothing makes a good first impression on men's families. We hadn't even looked at the menu yet. Matt finally looked up and told the waiter we were ready to order. But before I could even glance at the menu, his mother leaned over and announced she had already picked something safe for my pasta, with olive oil and grilled vegetables. Not because of allergies or any dietary restriction, just because it's polite not to eat messy food when you're being observed. Observed. I honestly didn't have the words for it. By this point, I was locked in. It felt like a social horror movie where I was the girl who had accidentally walked into the wrong house and decided to stay polite instead of running away. The food arrived, but the questions didn't stop. How many long-term relationships have you had? What went wrong in them? Do you believe in divorce? Do you think women should work after having kids? How much student debt do you have? I tried desperately to make eye contact with Matt, but he was checked out, just eating his food and nodding occasionally. He only spoke when his mother brought up children's names, actual suggestions for future grandchildren, and he said he liked the name Nolan Dot as if we were actually in the middle of planning a real-life family, and that's when she dropped the worst comment. Dot, she said, straight up, that I was doing better than the last one. I asked what that meant, and she said the last girl couldn't make eye contact, had chipped nail polish, and talked too much about her dog. Matt just nodded, like he agreed with everything she said. I honestly don't know how I got through the rest of the meal. I didn't touch the food or finish my drink. I just sat there and let his mother dissect my personality as if I was interviewing for the role of permanent daughter-in-law. When the check came, she paid. Not Matt, not me. His mother picked up the bill. Then she stood up, hugged me without asking, and said, "We'll be in touch." Not Matt will be in touch, but we. I left and blocked Matt's number before I even reached my car. I sat in the driver's seat, staring out at the parking lot for what felt like 10 minutes, just trying to process what had happened. The worst part is, I'm pretty sure this wasn't the first time he'd brought his mother along. I wouldn't be surprised if she had a whole rating system, a notebook somewhere filled with pros and cons, like some twisted version of Family Feud where she was the host, the judge, and the contestant all at once. Since that night, I don't really trust anyone who seems too close to their mother. Not joking. I don't usually go on blind dates. I've had enough awkward Hinge meets and just give it a chance setups from friends to know that those rarely end well. But this one was different. It didn't feel like the usual swipe left disaster waiting to happen. Instead, it had this odd, unsettling energy from the very start. A friend of a friend had introduced us, said she was cool, smart, a little intense, but in a good way, whatever that meant. I wasn't expecting fireworks or anything dramatic. I just figured we'd grab a drink, make some awkward small talk about work, maybe share a laugh about our worst date stories, and then either never text again or awkwardly follow each other on Instagram for a couple of weeks until it fizzled out. That's the usual rhythm with these things. We picked a quiet bar tucked behind a small bookstore. The layout was kind of strange. Half wine bar, half candlelit library vibes. Small tables squeezed between racks of books, too many plants, and music that sounded like it was produced by someone chewing synths underwater. I got there early, grabbed a booth near the back, and scrolled through my phone while waiting. She arrived exactly on time. Not a minute early, not a minute late. I know that sounds like a small detail, but something about her precise punctuality stuck with me. Her name was Camille. She had short black hair and a serious expression. She didn't smile when she sat down, just nodded once, like she was mentally ticking off a box. In her hand, she carried a big brown leather notebook, noticeably thick, and without even taking off her jacket, she placed it carefully on the table. I thought maybe she'd come straight from work or school. Maybe she was a grad student or someone who journals or sketches regularly. Before we even ordered drinks, she opened the notebook. No small talk, no introduction. She clicked her pen and looked me dead in the eye before starting to ask questions. At first, it seemed like a weird icebreaker. She asked about my job, which was fine. Then she asked how much I made. I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. She didn't smile or laugh. Instead, she repeated the question slowly, like I hadn't heard her the first time. I gave a rough estimate because I didn't know what else to say. She wrote it down, nodded as if judging my answer, and immediately moved on. Next came the question about my parents, how old they were when they died, and what they died of. I was sitting there, thinking, what the hell's going on? I told her both my parents were still alive. She pressed further, asking about their health in detail: blood pressure, heart issues, cholesterol levels, things I barely knew. When I hesitated, she made a face like I'd failed some kind of test. The waitress arrived to take our order, but Camille barely glanced at the menu. She just pointed at something and waved her hand, not even asking if I wanted anything. So I ordered a drink, hoping to buy some time. As soon as the waitress left, Camille was back at it. Politics, not just who I voted for, but how I felt about specific policies. She name-dropped obscure bills and watched my face carefully, as if searching for weaknesses. I tried cracking a joke to lighten the mood, but she didn't even flinch. She just wrote something in her notebook and said, in a totally flat tone, "You're doing better than the last one." That's when it hit me. This wasn't nerves. This wasn't her being quirky or awkward. This was something else entirely. She was screening me. Like straight up interview mode. No smiles, no real eye contact. Just flipping pages, scribbling notes, checking off lists. I asked if this was some kind of joke. She blinked slowly, like I had said something in a language she didn't understand. Then she moved on to childhood trauma. I'm not exaggerating. She wanted to know if I'd been to therapy, how many times, what the diagnosis was, if any. Asked if I'd ever had intrusive thoughts. Asked about my relationship with my siblings. I asked if she always did this on dates. She finally smiled, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile, and said, "Not always, just when it matters." Then she asked if I believed in fate. By that point, I wasn't angry or freaked out. I was just confused, like I was trying to solve a weird puzzle, and every answer just made it stranger. Our drinks arrived, but she didn't touch hers. She just kept writing. I couldn't see what she was jotting down from my side of the table, just notes, check marks, and strange little marks in the margins. Then she asked if I would be willing to relocate someday. I said no, instinctively. I liked where I lived. She scribbled something quickly and flipped the page. Then, and I swear this is exactly how she said it, she told me that my score was better than the last guy's, but still needs review. I just stared at her. Then she reached down into her bag and pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table toward me. I didn't open it. I just stared at it like it might bite. She told me I could review it later. Then she stood up, said she had enough for now, and walked out, left me sitting there with a full drink, a closed folder, and 100 questions stuck in my throat. Opened the folder once she was gone. Inside was a photocopy of some kind of form, like a spreadsheet, with names, numbers, and dates. I didn't recognize any of it. Except for one thing. My name, written near the bottom. In the notes section. Next to my name was a scribble that read, "Potential match, needs observation." I left right after that. Didn't even pay the tab. I just walked out and tossed the folder in the first trash can I saw. I blocked her number. Deleted the app. Never heard from her again. But I still think about it. What was that? Who was she? What was she doing? And how many people has she done that? Tio? This happened a few months ago, and I still think about it way too much. Not in a dramatic thriller movie kind of way, but more like a low-key feeling in the back of my mind that something was off. Even though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I met this guy, Liam, on a dating app I was barely using. I downloaded it one night during a bout of boredom and insomnia around 2 a.m. and forgot about it for a week. Then, out of nowhere, he messaged me. Honestly, he was fine. Not cringeworthy or overly flirty, just casual, a little funny, and with decent grammar, normal. And that was rare enough for me to think, okay, why not? We started texting, and after a few days, we agreed to meet up. We decided on a casual tea bar downtown, one of those spots with mismatched furniture, a wall of fake vines, and overpriced matcha. It was public, well lit, and the kind of place where no one pays much attention to you. When Liam arrived, he looked like his pictures, black jacket, jeans, and a soft voice. He didn't do anything strange right away, no weird compliments or awkward eye contact. Honestly, I was halfway through my drink, thinking maybe this would just be a chill night. Then he started asking questions. A lot of questions, not the usual small talk either. Some were quite personal and felt a little deep for a first date. Like asking what my room looked like or which side of the bed I sleep on. At the time, I thought maybe he was just quirky or trying to be different. Like he hated small talk and wanted to dive into real conversations quickly. I laughed it off and answered vaguely, brushing past those questions. But the strangest thing was he didn't offer much about himself. Every time I asked him something, he gave short answers. He didn't talk about his friends, his job, or where he grew up. Instead, he had just turned the conversation back to me with another question. I figured maybe he was shy or socially awkward. It wasn't a terrible time, so I stayed. We talked for a couple of hours. When the bar started to empty, I said I should head home. He offered to walk me to my car, but I declined. I hadn't parked very close, and honestly, something about the way he said it felt off. So I told him it was nice meeting him and left. I didn't give him my last name. Didn't mention my job. Didn't say what part of the city I lived in. The only things he had were my first name and the number I used on the app. I thought I was being cautious. I walked 2 blocks to my car and sat inside for a while, scrolling and trying to decompress. There was a strange tension I hadn't noticed during the date, but once I was alone, it hit me like I'd been holding my breath for 2 hours without realizing it. I drove home. Nothing unusual happened. Normal traffic, normal everything. I got inside, changed into comfortable clothes, turned on some mindless TV, and was halfway through zoning out when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, not saved, no context. The message read, "You looked beautiful walking up to your door." At first I stared at it, thinking maybe it was someone I knew or a wrong number, but I kept rereading it. I hadn't told anyone I was out, hadn't posted anything on social media, hadn't even texted a friend that day. No one else would know what my door looked like, and then it hit me. He followed me. I don't know when exactly he started. Maybe right after I left, maybe. Well, I walked to my car, or maybe he waited nearby. I don't know. And the worst part is, I never noticed. No footsteps behind me, no shadows, no sounds. I texted back, not something I usually do, but I was shaken and wanted to be sure. I just typed, "Who is this?" No reply. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, nothing. I started pacing around my apartment, checking windows, even though I live on the 3rd floor. I locked the balcony door, even though it was already locked. I was trying to convince myself it wasn't him. Maybe someone was just messing with me. But the timing, the wording, the fact that no one else knew where I was, it didn't feel random. The worst part wasn't even the message. It was the silence after it. I didn't sleep that night. Every little noise outside made me jump. I kept replaying the night in my head, trying to remember if he glanced at my phone or asked a question I hadn't noticed at the time. I never heard from him again, not directly. The next morning, I opened the app and his profile was gone. Not unmatched, just completely deleted or changed. I searched his number online. Nothing. No name, no location dot. I blocked the number and never responded again. But I still don't know how he found out where I lived. I didn't take the same route home that I'd mentioned during the date. I didn't park where I usually do. I made sure of all that. So he must have followed me. Not just for a few minutes, but the entire way. And he never said a word. Never made a sound. Just watched me walk up to my door like it was some twisted ending to a show he was starring in. And that is the part that stays with me. Not just that he followed me, but that he wanted me to know. I honestly don't even know why I agreed to this date in the first place. I wasn't really in the mood to meet anyone new. It had been a horrible week at work, the kind where even your toothbrush seems like it's trying to piss you off, and you feel justified being annoyed by the smallest things. But I matched with this guy, Devin, on Bumble, and he seemed alright, funny even. His profile was pretty basic, a few pictures of him with his dog, one where he was holding a fish, because apparently that's a requirement now or something. He messaged me first and didn't say anything weird or pushy, so I figured, yeah, why not? I needed to get out of the house anyway. We made plans for Saturday night. He picked the place, some kind of fusion restaurant in a warehouse district that used to be full of dead factories, but now had breweries, tattoo shops, and overpriced grilled cheese food trucks. He said he went there all the time and that he knew the chef, which looking back seems like a totally random thing to brag about on a first date. I got there a few minutes early. The outside was dark, not cozy dark, but crime scene dark. The whole block looked abandoned except for a flickering open sign and a single red light above the door. I wasn't exactly feeling optimistic, but I went inside anyway. The inside was surprisingly nice. Small tables, low lighting, and a moody vibe. The air smelled like garlic and fried oil mixed with something sour I couldn't quite place. The music was so quiet I barely noticed it, like someone had started a playlist and forgot to turn the volume up. Devin showed up right on time. He was tall, wore a little too much cologne, and had on a hoodie under a blazer, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to look casual or put together. But whatever, he smiled genuinely and didn't try to hug me immediately. So I thought, okay, we're off to a decent start. We sat down, and before I could even open the menu, he said, "Nah, don't worry about it. I got this. I've been here a million times. I know what's good." At first, I thought he was just being nice, trying to make things easy, but I mentioned casually that I had a mild shellfish allergy, just in case he was thinking oysters or something. I wasn't dramatic about it, just a simple, "Hey, no. Shrimp for me." He nodded, said he got it, and kept talking. He took over ordering with the waitress. She didn't write anything down, which made me nervous, but I didn't say anything. The conversation was all right, not amazing. He mostly talked about some startup idea he was working on, though it wasn't really a startup yet, more like a vibe he was trying to build. I asked a few polite questions, but he didn't ask much about me. He mostly went on about how restaurants nowadays don't understand intimacy anymore. Whatever that meant, dog. About 20 minutes later, the food arrived. I got a big plate of noodles with something dark on top, a skewer of grilled stuff, and a small bowl of soup that smelled strong. I picked up my fork and looked closely at the noodles. And then I saw it, full shrimp, sitting there like it wasn't the exact thing I said I couldn't eat. I paused, trying to stay cool and not make a scene, but inside I was annoyed. I said, "Hey, I told you I have a shellfish allergy. This has shrimp in it." He just laughed, didn't apologize, didn't look surprised, just laughed like it was a joke and I was supposed to be in on it. Then he said, and I swear I'll never forget this, I just wanted to see how bad your allergy really is. Like it was some kind of test, like I was a frog in a science experiment. At first. I thought I misheard him. But no, he repeated it and just kept eating like what he said wasn't completely messed up. I didn't even touch my food after that. I sat there watching him eat, feeling like I had somehow stepped into a parallel universe where people are this casually cruel and don't even notice it. He didn't ask if I was okay, didn't ask if I wanted to reorder something safe, didn't say sorry. He just kept chewing, made a joke about people exaggerating allergies, and then tried to steer the conversation back to his app idea again. I started to zone out, not because I was scared or anything. My allergy isn't life-threatening, more like hives, nausea, and a bad time if I eat shrimp, but because I suddenly realized I didn't want to be there at all. Not just at the restaurant, but anywhere near the sky dot. Yeah, maybe I should have gotten up and left right then. Maybe I should have said something sharper, but I just froze. Not because I didn't know what was happening, but because I couldn't wrap my head around someone thinking that was funny. Someone treating a health condition like a joke or a challenge. He actually tried to order dessert. No joke. He waved over the waitress and pointed at some matcha thing on the menu. I told him I was heading out. He didn't even protest. Just shrugged and said, "Your loss." Like he was proud of how the night went. I walked out without saying another word. Didn't bother calling a rideshare until I was a few blocks away. I just needed to put as much distance as possible between me and that place. I sat on the curb outside a closed tattoo shop and stared at a cracked sidewalk for 10 minutes. Thinking about how someone could hear you talk about your body, your health, and treat it like a game, like pressing a button to see what happens. What really gets me is how normal he seemed. How easy it is for people like that to pass the vibe check in texts, say all the right things, and then turn into someone who thinks your allergy is a punchline. I never blocked someone faster. The next day, he followed up with a text that said, "So, how bad was it really?" I didn't answer. I didn't even open it. It started out like a pretty average night. Nothing wild. Just dinner and drinks with someone I met off Hinge. Honestly, I was half ready to cancel earlier that day. I'd had one of those dragging, off-feeling mornings where everything feels slightly out of sync. But I didn't cancel, mostly because her texts had been solid, and I was curious to see how the night would go. We agreed to meet at this weird little spot downtown called Yarrow's. It was kind of tucked between a failing vape shop and a laundromat that looked like it had survived 3 apocalypses. Still, it had a certain charm. String lights hung outside. The windows fogged up from the warmth inside, and when you walked past, it smelled like garlic and rosemary. I got there first. I'm compulsively early for everything, and the hostess stuck me at a small table near the back wall. The place was dim, but in a cozy way. Flickering candles burned on every table, and dusty shelves lined the walls, filled with used books and empty wine bottles used as decoration. It had personality. It felt like it belonged in a different city. Maybe Portland or somewhere equally hipsterish. I was halfway into a whiskey sour when she showed up. Her name was Talia. She wore a red jacket, silver rings on half her fingers, and had a little tattoo of a moth on her wrist. She smiled when she saw me and sat down immediately, like we were picking up in the middle of a conversation. She carried herself with confidence, not rehearsed or forced, just natural. I liked her instantly. The first half hour was easy. We ordered share plates, roasted mushrooms, some kind of flatbread with lamb on it, and charred carrots with tahini. We traded dumb childhood stories and shared memories of bad first jobs. She was quick-witted and knew how to land a joke. She laughed at mine without overdoing it. It felt good. About 40 minutes in, I was just about to tell her this story about how I got kicked out of a water park when I was 13, when I noticed her eyes flick over my shoulder. It was subtle, not dramatic or obvious, just a little shift. Then she smiled again like nothing happened. I let it go the first time, but it happened again 2 minutes later. This time she tensed up a bit, her shoulders stiffening before she caught herself. So I turned away, pretending to reach for my drink, and casually glanced around the room. There was a guy sitting maybe 3 tables away, alone. He wore a ratty green jacket, like something pulled from a Goodwill bin, and his stare was weirdly intense. He wasn't looking at me or at his food. He was locked on her, completely still, almost like he wasn't even blinking. I turned back toward Talia and thought, okay, maybe this guy is just weird. It's a city. Weird dudes are everywhere. But then she picked up her drink with both hands, leaned toward me, and in a low voice, fast and almost rushed, she said, okay, don't freak out, but that's my ex. I was like, what? She just nodded and didn't elaborate. She looked down at her plate and cut a piece of carrot as if we were discussing the weather. Now I was trying to act normal, but the guy was not subtle at all. He was still staring, arms crossed, with a dead expression like he was watching a movie. Finally, I asked gently if she wanted to leave. She sighed, not scared, more annoyed, and said, he does this. He shows up. I didn't tell him where we were going. I never do, but he still finds out. Suddenly, this light, flirtatious dinner turned heavy. She told me, still speaking quietly, that they broke up 6 months ago. It had been messy, but not in the screaming, breaking the plates way. More like a slow unraveling. She realized he didn't really have a life outside of her. He never had friends, never left the house unless it was with her. At first, she thought he was just quiet, maybe introverted, but toward the end, he started getting this look, like he was watching her, studying her. She said it felt like he wasn't even angry when she ended it. Just calmed. Then the coincidences started, like he'd be in line behind her at the cafe near her work. She'd be walking home and hear his boots behind her, always about half a block back. He never said anything, never approached her. He just watched. The first time it happened on a date, she brushed it off. Maybe he was actually out somewhere. But now she's sure. Every date she's tried to go on since they split, he's been there. Not every time, but enough to be a pattern. She'd even stopped dating altogether for a while because it was getting under her skin, and tonight was her trying again. So here I was, sitting with someone I liked, who was clearly trying to act like everything was fine, while a guy across the room stared lasers into her. This might sound dumb, but suddenly I felt like I was in some kind of test. Like how I responded to this situation mattered, though I wasn't sure what the stakes were. I told her again that we could leave, maybe grab a drink somewhere else. She looked at the guy, then back at me and said, yeah, let's go. We stood up, and that's when he stood up too. Not quickly, but like he was syncing his movements with ours. We headed out. I didn't look back, and neither did she. We crossed the street and walked for about 3 blocks in silence. I kept expecting her to laugh and say something like, okay, that was nuts. But she did in single quotes T. Eventually, we ducked into a loud bar with neon signs and terrible music. It was crowded enough that we felt swallowed up by the noise. She grabbed used drinks, and we sat down in a small booth toward the back. For a moment, it felt normal again. The music was too loud to talk much, so we just sat there, sharing this weird buzz of adrenaline, discomfort, and relief. Then she got up to go to the bathroom. While she was gone, I glanced toward the front of the bar. He was there. Not inside, but outside, standing across the street under a flickering streetlight, not moving, not even looking at the bar, just standing like he knew. I almost didn't tell her, but I did. She closed her eyes for a second when I told her. When she opened them, she looked tired. That's what he does, she said. We didn't stay out much longer after that. She called a ride. I waited with her. I didn't touch her or try to kiss her goodbye. I didn't make any dramatic promises. She said thanks, got in the car, and left. I watched the car disappear down the road. Looked across the street again. He was gone, just like that.